Eze, Crystal Palace wonder boy, talisman, some might say. Is it Spurs or is it Arsenal? What are we hearing?
At the moment, it's Crystal Palace because nobody has an agreement with them to sign Eze. And of course, we'll be talking about this as the transfer window draws towards a close because he's of interest to big clubs. And I don't think Crystal Palace have ever this summer been averse to the idea of him leaving. They know the idea of challenging himself at, say, Champions League level is one that will carry great appeal. And if the finances had been right or are going to be right, then there could be a deal to be done. There's a lot of talk about this release clause, 60 plus £8 million, and when it expires. But even if there's no release clause there, that's the sort of money that Palace would be looking for. And yeah, we know there's been strong interest from Arsenal and they'd had conversations with his camp. It now emerges that Tottenham have been holding some talks around the situation. But at the time of recording, to my knowledge, neither of those clubs are prepared to pay the level of finance that Crystal Palace would be looking for at this moment to do the deal. As I said, around £68 million, which was or is the release clause value. So unless that changes or those clubs are suddenly more willing to pay that amount of money, then he will stay with Crystal Palace. Whether that is beyond the transfer window, I don't know, because a lot can change. Or will Crystal Palace come down in their asking price and then one of those clubs or another is prepared to do the deal? We know with Arsenal, the situation seemed to be linked to Ethan Nwaniere's future. And don't forget, he went into the last 12 months of his contract before signing a new deal. If he was going to leave, clearly Arsenal were lining up a deal for Eze for that same sort of position, the 8-10 role. With Ethan Nwaniere signing the new deal, which is amazing news for Arsenal, the need for Eze or another player in that position was less pressing, and maybe they were then focusing on other areas. It's not that he's gone from the agenda. There's a great affection for Eze at Arsenal and vice versa. He grew up as a fan of the club, we're led to believe. And so we need to keep an eye on that situation. But, you know, there will be considerations at Arsenal on the price, on the age profile and on the position. In the meantime, Tottenham with departure of Son and injuries to the likes of Maddison, they are looking at that number 10 role, but they're looking at multiple candidates. And again, that price might not be right for them, with the age profile as well. And so the longer it goes towards the deadline, Crystal Palace, their stance may harden because, you know, losing him and the financial cost, but also the positional need is going to be ever more sharp. Their time is reducing to find a replacement at all, let alone a suitable replacement. And so this is not clear-cut yet. There's no direction of travel right now. And so a bit of patience is required. And I think all outcomes are still possible.
I think if he signed for Tottenham, he would go in and be their best player this season. Certainly their best attacking player. Because he's so good. Like he's really proved this over the last 5 years since he left QPR to go to Crystal Palace. Unbelievably good footballer. Like he's so clever, he's so skillful, he's so imaginative. I love watching him play, and I think he brings all those things, which is exactly what Tottenham need right now, because Maddison's going to miss so much time this year, because Kulusevski's recovering from his own knee surgery. You know, Spurs, if you look at the Spurs team, they've got some brilliant players in defence, you know, not least Romero and Van de Ven, who I think are both world-class centre-backs. They've got some pretty good players like in defensive midfield now, and they've got some fairly good players in the front line, but they just need that bit of magic in that sort of number 10 space to knit it all together and to actually create the chances and to go from, to turn possession into goals. And I think that's why they need Eze so much. And don't get me wrong, I think if he went to Arsenal, I think he'd do really well there. He's a really good player who would be elevated by the quality of the players playing around him. But I think at Tottenham, he would be a bit more of a game changer. He'd be a bit more of a difference maker for them if he does actually go there. Although, of course, we're still, as far as as it stands, I don't think any bid has been made. So we've got to wait and see what exactly happens over the rest of the window.
Yeah, we'll talk about Spurs in more detail later on, before the transfer window closes.
I guess we need to pay attention to the number 6 at Manchester United because that's a position that they're really keen to fill. Their top target is Carlos Baleba of Brighton and Hove Albion. They're looking into the situation, exploring it via intermediaries on their behalf. Brighton have no intention of selling this summer. They'd prefer to keep him for at least another year. And to our knowledge, they've not put a price on it yet. If that price comes and it's too high for Manchester United, then they'll presumably go away. If it's achievable, maybe they continue to follow up the case. From what we know, Baleba would be open to the possibility, and that means personal terms wouldn't be a problem. And Man United players have been in contact with him, sort of talking about a potential move and the project and ambition, etc. So definitely that's an interesting case. If they don't get him, do they look to somebody else? Because it really is important for Ruben Amorim and the club, as is their goalkeeping situation. But at the moment, there's no sign of a departure for Andre Onana. And then maybe Tottenham. They're looking at all different possibilities because of injury, because of departures. We've talked about some of them already. What about Savinho at Manchester City? They would really like to sign him. Some conversations have been held that focused on, a deal in the region of 50 million euros. Clearly Manchester City, if there's going to be any departure. And I say that with a capital IF because the word coming from the Etihad is that there was an inquiry, it was rebuffed, and it's going no further. But if they were to consider parting with him, it would take evidently a far higher number. Are Tottenham willing to stretch that far? If they are, then possibly there could be a deal because we think he would be open to the chance. And Pep Guardiola, we've seen historically, tends not to stand in the way of players if they don't want to be there. Should he leave the Etihad, then City would look to replace him, as I understand it, and they've been linked with Rodrigo and various others, whereas the departures of, say, a Grealish and a McAtee wouldn't necessarily require a replacement. So maybe we'll look at both Manchester clubs in the case of the six and the goalkeeper at United and the winger situation at City, and throw Tottenham into the mix because they're related to that transaction or potential deal.